How does a black single dad protect his dignity in front of his 5-year-old son after being humiliated and fired at 8:30 a.m.? At the Atherton Marble lobby, Celeste Beaumont kicked Toby's toys to force Damian Cole to confess to stealing a $180,000 watch. Damian is actually a secret financial genius who chose to work as a butler to hide from the world after losing his wife. This injustice forces him to step into the light and fight the corrupt leaders of the Kingsley and Nexus Corporation. Facing media attacks and blocked funds from his rival, can one fateful phone call help him buy the entire company the next day? And it all started 3 years earlier, on a quiet morning nobody thought would change everything. Damian Cole stood in the marble lobby at 8:29 in the morning. His work boots squeaked on the cold stone floor. The smell of fresh eucalyptus from the hallway diffuser mixed with old money and floor wax. Somewhere upstairs, a vacuum hummed against carpet, steady and rhythmic like a heartbeat. A thin line of steam rose from a coffee cart near the window, curling toward the skylight. Damian liked mornings like this. Quiet, predictable, safe. For 3 years, this house had been his whole world. Marble floors, glass walls, a pool that seemed to spill straight into the sky. He kept every schedule perfect. He fixed every broken light before anyone noticed it was gone. Nobody here knew his real name, and that was exactly how he wanted it. He knelt down to zip up Toby's small backpack. His son was 5 years old, with 2 missing front teeth and a wooden giraffe toy clutched under one arm. The giraffe's ear was cracked and worn smooth from years of little fingers rubbing it. It had been Sarah's gift to Toby before she died. Damian never let anyone touch that giraffe. At 8:30 sharp, heels cracked across the marble like gunfire. Celeste Beaumont always announced herself before anyone saw her face. Her designer heels, her tailored blazers, her diamond earrings, all of it was armor she wore on purpose. Today she marched in holding an empty glass display case. Her face had gone pale under her makeup. Her jaw was locked tight. "Where is it?" she said. Her voice cut through the quiet lobby. Damian stood up slowly. "Where is what, Miss Beaumont?" "Nathaniel's watch. The Audemars Piguet. $180,000. Gone." She stepped closer, invading the small space between them. "You're the only one with access to that room." 15 other staff members froze in the hallway. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loud. A wall clock ticked somewhere behind them, each second landing like a small drumbeat. Damian felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice low and even. "I haven't touched that case," he said. Celeste's eyes narrowed at his answer. Her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer, cold and deliberate. "Of course you'd say that. People like you always do." The words hit the room like a slap. A few staff members looked down at their shoes. "Pull the security footage," Damian said. The AI cameras covered that whole hallway. Celeste laughed, a short, sharp sound. "How convenient. The system glitched last night. No footy exists." Damian's pulse thumped once, hard, behind his ears, when he read the words back. He kept his hands still at his sides, though every muscle in his body wanted to move. "You have 10 minutes to clear out your things," Celeste said, "and take your little charity case with you." She flicked her eyes toward Toby, who was gathering wooden blocks off the floor. Then, without warning, she swung her foot and kicked Toby's worn canvas backpack across the marble. Wooden blocks and small toy cars scattered everywhere across the cold marble. Toby's eyes went wide. His small hand shook as he scrambled to collect his things. Something cold and still settled over Damian's chest. Not rage. Something quieter and heavier than rage. He knelt down next to his son. He gathered the scattered blocks one at a time, slow and steady, like the world wasn't ending around them. "It's okay, buddy," Damian whispered. "We're going home." He did not look at Celeste again. He did not need to. 22 minutes later, Damian's old Ford SUV pulled out of the Atherton Hills. Rust crept along the wheel well on the passenger side. The engine coughed once before settling into a low rattle. Toby sat in the back seat, working his small fingers over the cracked ear of his wooden giraffe. He didn't cry. He just stared out the window, watching the mansion shrink behind them. Damien gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went pale. His jaw stayed tight the whole drive down the hill. The radio stayed off. Neither of them wanted noise right now. They arrived at their small apartment in Oakland 26 minutes later. The rent was $1.450 a month, and every dollar of it mattered now. Their building smelled like fried onions from the corner restaurant downstairs. A neighbor's radio played soft jazz through the thin hallway wall. It wasn't marble. It wasn't glass. But it was warm, and it was theirs. Damien checked his banking app, while Toby napped on the couch. The screen glowed with a number that made his stomach drop. $2,410. 15. That was everything. His entire safety net, sitting in a checking account under a name nobody in Atherton had ever heard. Because Damien Cole was not just a butler. 3 years earlier, before the accident that took Sarah's life, Damien had been a co-founder of Apex Horizon, a venture fund worth billions of dollars. He had built it from nothing, starting with 3 laptops and a rented office above a laundromat in San Francisco. Then came the accident. A rainy night. A truck that ran a red light. Sarah never made it to the hospital. Damien buried Apex Horizon along with his old name and his old life. He watched paramedics load his wife into an ambulance, and something inside him closed like a door. He didn't want fame. He didn't want cameras. He wanted quiet mornings with his son, safe from a world that had already taken too much from him. But quiet mornings were over now. At exactly 11:15 that morning, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was Celeste. Damien's stomach tightened before he even opened it. "Your career in California is officially finished, thief," it read. Before Damien could respond, another call came through. This one was encrypted, routed through 3 servers before it reached his phone. Only one person had that number. "Damien," Raymond Mercer said, his voice low and urgent. "We have a problem." Raymond had managed Damien's fortune in total secrecy for 3 years. He was the only person alive who knew who Damien really was. "Kingsley Nexus is collapsing," Raymond said. "Nathaniel made bad bets. Real estate, crypto, 6 failed ventures. They need $450 million by 5 o'clock tomorrow, or the whole company goes under." Damien sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the chair creaking under his weight. "That company owns half the estates in Atherton." "Not for much longer," Raymond said. "We're on the street. Nobody wants to touch it. Too risky. Too many red flags." Damien felt his chest tighten at the words. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Celeste Beaumont works for that company," Raymond said. "And because she just tried to sell confidential estate security data to a rival investment fund in exchange for an executive position." Damien closed his eyes. Something ugly twisted low in his stomach. "She framed an innocent man for theft," Raymond continued, "while secretly betraying the very company she claims to protect." Damien looked over at Toby, still sleeping on the couch, one small hand curled around the wooden giraffe. He thought about staying quiet. He thought about disappearing into anonymity the way he'd planned for 3 long years. But then he thought about his son growing up believing that silence was the only answer to cruelty. "Give me time to think," Damien told Raymond, and hung up the phone. He tried the honest path first. That afternoon, he drove to a legal aid office on Broadway in downtown Oakland. Free legal help for people who couldn't afford lawyers. The waiting room had rows of plastic chairs and a water cooler that gurgled every few minutes. A ceiling tile above him had a brown water stain shaped like a small cloud. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang twice and stopped. The attorney behind the desk sighed as she flipped through Damien's file. "Miss Beaumont has a legal team backing her. Full resources from Kingsley Nexus." She looked up at him with something like pity. "You're a black man with an accusation of grand theft against you. This system wasn't built to protect people like you. So there's nothing I can do?" Damien asked. "If you fight her publicly," the attorney warned, She has the influence to call Child Protective Services. She could claim your home isn't safe for your son. Damien's stomach dropped like a stone through water. He thought of Toby's small face and how easily good people become targets in a broken system. He left the office with his hands shaking, though his face stayed calm. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright for how heavy his chest had become. At 2:30 that afternoon, Raymond showed up in person. He drove an ordinary sedan to a small diner in Oakland called the Rusty Spoon, 3 blocks from Damien's apartment. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease. A bell above the door jingled as Raymond stepped inside, glancing over his shoulder out of old habit. He slid into a corner booth, away from the front windows. Raymond slid into the booth across from Damien. He set down a financial report 80 pages thick. Then he placed something else on the table. It was a crayon drawing. Toby had made it weeks earlier. It showed a man in a cape, holding a shield over a small boy. "Your son thinks you're already a hero," Raymond said quietly. "But heroes fight back when it matters." Damien stared at the drawing for a long moment. His throat felt tight. "There's something else," Raymond said. He slid another folder across the table. 14 fraudulent transactions. $2,100,000. All disguised as security maintenance costs. All approved by Celeste Beaumont. Damien's fingers curled slowly into fists on the table. "She's been stealing from the Kingsley estate for 2 years," Raymond said, while blaming everyone else for her own crimes. The diner's old ceiling fan clicked steadily overhead. Somewhere behind the counter, a coffee pot hissed against its warmer. "You don't have to do this," Raymond said quietly. "You can still walk away and disappear again." "Not anymore," Damien answered. "Not after what she did to my son." Damien looked up. Something had shifted behind his eyes. The quiet butler was gone. What remained was colder, sharper, and fully awake. "Cancel the loan structure," Damien said. "Turn it into a hostile takeover. I want full controlling shares of Kingsley Nexus before the market opens tomorrow." Raymond blinked. "Damien, that's $450 million committed by tomorrow morning." "Then we better move fast," Damien said. "There's a risk," Raymond added carefully. "Once we move this fast, your name might surface publicly. Are you ready for that?" Damien glanced toward the hallway, where Toby's small shoes sat lined up by the door. "I've hidden long enough," he said. "It's time." At 3:15 that afternoon, Damien pulled an old steel box from beneath his bed. Inside sat a satellite phone, military-grade, coded X100. He hadn't touched it in 3 years. Dust coated the lid, and the hinges creaked when he opened it. He dialed Raymond's private line. "Execute the takeover," he said. "Full control. No dilas." The moment he hung up, the apartment lights flickered once and went dark. Damien moved to the window. Across the street, a black Lincoln SUV sat idling, license plate ending in 77. 2 men in dark suits watched the building from inside. His pulse thudded once behind his ribs, sharp and sudden. He drew the blinds shut without hurry. Somewhere out there, people were already watching him, and he had less than a day to finish what he'd started. His hand stayed steady, even as his mind raced through every possible move ahead. Overnight, Damien worked through a storm of resistance from Kingsley Nexus's board. Loyal executives deployed defense after defense to block the takeover. A senior board member named Gerald Whitfield tried freezing outside shares through an old bylaw nobody had touched in years. Another executive leaked a false rumor to a finance blog, claiming the buyer was a foreign shell company. Raymond fought back, with lawyers on standby in 3 time zones, ready the moment papers needed signing. One by one, the defenses cracked under the weight of Apex Horizons resources. Damien barely slept. He drank cold coffee at the kitchen table, while numbers scrolled across his laptop screen. Every hour brought a new wall, and every wall came down a little faster than the one before it. "We're close," Raymond said, over the phone around midnight. "But close isn't enough. We still need Marcus Vance's shares to lock this down completely." "Then I'll get them myself," Damien said, already reaching for his jacket. Damien, it's the middle of the night, Raymond warned. It's not safe out there. Nothing about this week has been safe, Damien answered, and hung up the phone. Then, at nearly midnight, an unexpected call came, through from a payphone on El Camino Real. Damien, a woman whispered, "It's Brenda, from the estate." Brenda had worked as a housekeeper at the Atherton mansion for 11 years. She had raised 3 kids on that paycheck alone ever since her husband passed. Celeste had threatened to fire her twice, once for arriving 4 minutes late during a rainstorm. "I saw Celeste slip that watch into her Hermes Birkin bag," Brenda said, her voice trembling, "before she even reported it missing. I want to tell the truth, Damien. I'm just scared." "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," Damien told her gently. "But thank you. This matters more than you know." Meanwhile, across town, a private investigator hired by Celeste broke into Damien's old apartment building. The hallway light above him buzzed and flickered, casting jagged shadows on the peeling paint. He carried a small bag of narcotics, planning to plant evidence before the takeover could finish. He never got the chance. Raymond's security team intercepted him within minutes, quietly, without a single headline. They left no trace behind, only a locked door and an empty stairwell. Earlier that evening, Damien had sat on the edge of Toby's bed, smoothing the blanket over his son's small shoulders. "Are we going to be okay, Dad?" Toby had asked, hugging his giraffe close. "We're always going to be okay," Damien told him, "no matter what happens tomorrow." Toby studied his father's face for a moment, then nodded and closed his eyes. Damien stayed there a while, watching the slow rise and fall of his son's small chest. Before he left the apartment, that night, Damien carried Toby down the hall to Mrs. Alvarez, their elderly neighbor. She had watched Toby before, whenever Damien worked late shifts at the estate. "Something came up," Damien told her. "I need a few hours." Mrs. Alvarez studied his face, then nodded without asking questions. Years of quiet trust between neighbors needed no explanation tonight. "Go. We'll be fine. Toby and I have cookies to bake." Toby waved sleepily from her doorway, giraffe tucked under his arm. Damien kissed his forehead, then walked back out into the cold night air. A single streetlight buzzed above the parking lot as he climbed into his car. By 10:45 that night, Damien needed one final piece. 8% of voting shares still remained out of reach. A bitter former shareholder named Marcus Vance held them all. Marcus lived in a fortified home hidden in the hills of San Mateo County. Damien drove there himself, engine humming low through dark mountain roads. Pine and cold night air pressed through the cracked window. He thought about Sarah during the drive. She used to tell him that real strength never needed to shout. He gripped the wheel a little tighter, letting her voice steady his nerves. Gravel crunched under his tires as he slowed near the gate. 2 guards patrolled the outer fence, flashlights sweeping slow circles across the grass. Damien slipped past them, through a side gate left unlocked by a groundskeeper Raymond had quietly paid off. Inside Marcus's office, Damien found something he didn't expect. 2 of Celeste's hired men stood over Marcus, forcing him to sign his shares over to a shell company. Damien's jaw locked tight. His hands curled slowly at his sides. A vein pulsed once at his temple, the only sign of the storm underneath. "Let him go," Damien said, stepping into the light. One of the men reached for a gun tucked in his jacket. Marcus flinched, pressing himself against the wall behind the desk. Silence dropped over the room like a blanket. Then everything happened fast. Damien moved before the man could raise his weapon. In 4 seconds, the gun clattered to the floor, kicked aside, and useless. Marcus stumbled back, breathing hard, his hands still shaking against the desk. Relief and fear crossed his face at the same time. At 11:30 that night, Damien sat across from Marcus, calm as still water. "Sign with Celeste," Damien said, "and you become an accomplice to $2,100,000 in fraud. 15 years in federal prison waits for you, with no chance of early release." Marcus's face went pale as paper. Sweat beaded along his hairline. "Sign with me instead," Damien continued, "and you walk away with $32,500,000. Clean. No charges. No prison." Marcus looked at Damien for a long moment, studying his calm face like he was searching for a trick hidden somewhere behind it. "Why would you offer me that?" Marcus asked. "Because I don't need your money," Damien said. "I need your shares, and I need this finished before sunrise." Marcus's hand trembled as he reached for the pen. The scratch of ink against paper was the only sound in the room. By 1:15 in the morning, Raymond's system flashed green across the screen. 51.2%. Full controlling ownership of Kingsley Nexus secured. Damien exhaled slowly for the first time in hours. Along with the shares came something even more valuable: full administrator access to the Atherton Estate's entire security cloud, untouched and unedited. But there was no time to celebrate. Buried inside the estate's restored security cloud, Damien found something urgent. Celeste had booked a one-way flight to Zurich, departing at 9 that morning under a fake passport reading clairvoyant. Damien stared at the screen, his tired eyes suddenly sharp again. She had planned her escape days in advance. She just never planned on losing control of the company first. Less than 8 hours remained before she could vanish forever. At 4:30 in the morning, Nathaniel Kingsley received a call that made his blood run cold. His company had been fully acquired by an anonymous buyer overnight. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the phone. Panicked, he called Celeste. They agreed to meet at the Atherton estate at 8 sharp to transfer power to whoever now controlled everything. Nathaniel paced his kitchen floor for an hour, replaying every bad decision that had led to this moment. He had no idea the buyer was a man he had walked past in his own hallway 100 times. Celeste, though rattled, decided to finish one last task before her flight. She would interview Damien's replacement. She would also empty the last confidential files from the office safe. Before leaving her apartment, she made one more call. She asked the Atherton police to station 2 officers at the estate that morning, claiming she feared Damien might return to cause trouble. She thought she was setting a trap. She had no idea the trap had already closed around her. At 8:15 that morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Atherton mansion's main hallway. Dust floated in the golden light like tiny, slow, moving stars. Celeste stood in a cream silk dress, chin lifted, addressing the staff and 2 waiting police officers. Her voice carried the same cold confidence she always wore like armor. Her heels clicked against the marble as she paced, rehearsing her next act of authority. Then the front doors opened. A line of black Rolls-Royce cars rolled to a stop outside. Gravel crunched under polished tires as engines settled into silence. Damien Cole stepped out wearing a tailored suit worth $12,000. The fabric moved with him like it had always belonged there. His shoulders were relaxed. His face was calm, almost peaceful, the way still water looks right before it moves. Beside him walked Nathaniel Kingsley, head bowed low, sweat beading at his temple. Celeste opened her mouth to order the officers to arrest Damien on sight. Nathaniel's voice cut through the room instead. "Celeste, this is Mr. Damien Cole, chairman of Apex Horizon. He acquired full control of this company at 6 o'clock this morning." The color drained from Celeste's face. "He owns everything now," Nathaniel said, his voice shaking. "Including your position." Celeste's mouth opened, but no words came out. Damien walked forward, calm and unhurried. He nodded once to his security engineer standing near the hallway monitor. "Pull the footage," Damien said quietly. "Last night, 11:42. The screen above them flickered to life. The room went completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. On the screen, Celeste's own hands appeared, slipping the Audemars Piguet watch into her Hermes handbag. Her own private confession, recorded in perfect clarity, played back for everyone in the hallway to see. Gasps rippled through the staff standing behind her. Somewhere near the kitchen, a tray of glasses shook softly on a cart. Celeste's knees buckled. She dropped to the marble floor, grabbing at the hem of Damien's jacket. Her perfect composure had shattered into something small and desperate. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking apart. "I can explain. My family needed money. I made mistakes." Her hands trembled against the cold marble floor. Damien stepped back, calm and steady. He turned instead toward his son, who stood proudly by his side, wooden giraffe tucked safely under one arm. He would not let this moment touch Toby's pride. His son had already seen enough ugliness for one lifetime. The two Atherton police officers moved forward without hesitation. Cold metal cuffs clicked shut around Celeste's wrists, the sound sharp against the sudden silence of the hallway. She sobbed as they led her out, through the same marble lobby, where she had once humiliated a father and his son. Within days, prosecutors charged her with grand theft and fraud. Kingsley Nexus's own lawyers, the same lawyers she once bragged about, refused to represent her. Her fiancé canceled their wedding by text message before she even reached the county jail. Nobody in that hallway said a word. Some things don't need commentary. Some things speak entirely for themselves. Brenda stood near the back of the crowd, tears sliding down her cheeks. She had spent weeks afraid to speak the truth out loud. Now she watched justice arrive, without needing her testimony at all. Word of what happened at the Atherton estate spread through the housekeeping staff within hours. By afternoon, local news vans lined the street outside the gates, though Damien refused every camera and every microphone pushed toward him. A local paper ran a short story about the takeover, calling it the quietest billion-dollar deal Silicon Valley had ever seen. Reporters camped outside the estate gates for nearly a week, hungry for a single quote. Damien never gave an interview. He let the truth sit exactly where it landed. Later that week, Damien made his final decision about the Atherton estate. He walked through its empty halls one last time, footsteps echoing off the glass and marble. He sold the glass-walled mansion at auction for $58,500,000. Every dollar went towards something new. He founded the Sarah Cole Community Development Fund, named after his late wife. The fund would build affordable housing across Oakland. It would open free coding classes for children who never had the chance to dream that big. It would also fund scholarships for kids raised by single parents, just like Toby. He promoted Brenda to Chief Operations Officer of the estate's newly reformed property division. Her new salary was $120,000 a year, and she cried when he told her. 11 years, and nobody ever saw me, Brenda said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I saw you, Damien told her. You just needed someone willing to look. Damien didn't stay in a mansion, not even for one more night. He took Toby's small hand and walked out through the same iron gates that once locked them out. The gates creaked open behind them, wide and unguarded now. Together, they climbed into the old Ford SUV, rust and all. On the dashboard, tucked behind the visor, Damien found something he hadn't seen in years. A small brass key, the one Sarah had given him before she passed. He turned it slowly between his fingers, feeling the worn metal edges. Engraved on its surface were words he had almost forgotten. Honor is the greatest thing we leave our children. Toby looked up at his father, grinning with his two missing front teeth. He hugged the wooden giraffe tight against his chest. Dad, he said, you're the best hero in the whole world. Damien smiled, quiet and full, as he turned the key in the ignition. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel like he was hiding from anything. He felt like exactly who he was. The engine rattled once, then settled into a steady, familiar hum. Outside the window, the Oakland skyline waited under a soft morning light. Because in the end, dignity was never about marble floors or diamond watches. It was about a father, a son, and a small, cracked giraffe that carried more worth than any fortune. It was about a promise kept, long after the world had tried to break it. It was about the truth that always finds its way home.